Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second OPSWAT Academy hosted webinar. This is a webinar, if you're first tuning in, where we talk to industry experts about various topics within critical infrastructure security and general cybersecurity practices as a whole. Today, very excited to host our guest speaker, Stephanie. Stephanie, will you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thank you for showing up and being here. And Nate, thank you for including me. My name is Stephanie. I am a senior product manager here at OPSWAT on the file scan side. In my past experiences in my career of cybersecurity around 5 years now, I have been a security engineer, a threat analyst, threat hunter, and also a sales engineer for really focusing on incident response and managed detection response. So as I do have kind of a bit of tools under my belt and experiences, I hold a lot of passion in the threat hunting aspect, open source intelligence, and just cybersecurity in general. So really excited to dive in the topics that we have today.
Sounds good. One of the things that we're going to be getting in today is some of the topics that Stephanie just outlined with threat hunting and the concepts of malware analysis. But before we jump into that, Stephanie, can you tell us a little bit about how you got introduced into this industry, a little bit of your backstory?
Yeah, so I guess it really started out as I was really choosing what to do, what to study at college. For those of you that don't know me, I grew up here in Indianapolis and went to school at a university called Indiana University, Purdue University, Indianapolis. So two big schools combined to one. I quickly found out that nursing was actually my original plan, did not turn out well. I kind of scoped the idea of being a nurse and said, maybe not so much. So then I changed into computer graphics. I still do a lot of that on the side, logo creating, website design, 3D design, animation was always kind of a passion of mine. But then I saw realistically, how can I make this a career? I've always been infatuated with technology itself. Becoming, I guess, growing up and becoming an adult and as an adolescent, I think, it really started out at MySpace for those of you that hopefully remember MySpace. I actually really enjoyed creating custom code, custom HTML for profiles and whatnot,
Yeah,
and
it's always that one little spark, and that
right.
was yours then. Okay.
Yeah, and having, like, custom music in my profile, things like that. Um,
Hmm.
but then again, right, I said, "What can I, like, really do to where I'm enjoying it. I'm not too overworked physically. I'm fine. What do I have an interest in? I've always been interested in crime and technology, and I think the two mesh together is cybersecurity. I did a lot of research on my end. I spoke to a lot of individuals in the industry itself, as well as the university, which has amazing tools at I think every school, every resource out there is really good to take advantage. We can dive into those as well later. But I think, to really jumpstart my career is when I chose to finally switch my major into computer information technology with a concentration in cybersecurity and a minor in software development. So I won't say it's the easiest, right? I think a lot of people here today that are listening are very aware of how hard it is to break into it, how challenging it is to go through it, but hopefully we can, discuss some of that today. But yeah, I think that's the short story of really how I got in the industry.
That's really awesome. Yeah, we get a lot of questions about how to uh, get your foot in the door. A lot of the people that watch this webinar are maybe looking for insight on how to facilitate this kind of career. And honestly, it's always a journey for anybody that's ever had any success in the industry. A lot of times you hear about people that necessarily didn't really start out.
Yep.
A lot of uh, children when they're in high school being asked what they want to do when they grow up, they don't say cybersecurity engineer in any sense of the fashion, but it really is such a rewarding and exciting field to be in, and constantly evolving as well, which is, you know, once again another aspect of the topics we're jumping into later. Um, so let's set the stage here. You've actually joined a relatively newer department within the company,
Mhm.
where we are breaking into uh, uh, the true malware analysis um, processes over malware detection. And there's been a long history of uh, mitigation terminologies being interchanged incorrectly, but still accepted in normal conversation and even business documents and terms. So, in your words, can you tell us what the actual differences are between malware detection and malware analysis?
Yeah, Nate, that's a really good point. I think, in today's industry, because it's constantly changing, terminology is always going to change, and I think every organization, even cybersecurity companies itself, do things very differently. In my own words, I think the difference of the malware detection and malware analysis is when you're detecting malware, you do have the tools still, just like you would analyzing it, to solely break down the malware, right? Where did it originate from? Where did it come from? But as in terms of what actionable items can we do with this malware within malware detection? Can we block it? Can we isolate a specific thing with it? What does the path look like? Can we get rid of it? When we're looking at malware analysis, you're not just isolating it or blocking it. You're really gonna be dissecting it. So just think of if, somebody's trying to break into your house and you're just putting an alarm up and you're stopping them from coming in. I think that's a good analogy for malware detection. For malware analysis is who was it? What were they doing? What was their intention? Why were they trying to get in? How many times, did they knock around the windows or doors? I mean, I think the importance of it and, why this topic really comes up in any organization is when we think about the worst thing that could ever happen, knock on wood, is ransomware for everyone. I think everyone is very afraid of ransomware, of having that kind of accidental, business decision to that it's down. Your business is down, you're losing money.
Mhm.
Costs are important. So I think when people look at malware detection versus malware analysis is where is your security posture? Where's your importance of, hey, we just want to isolate it, we just want to have the tools, we just want to have the software, maybe AI involved, not so much of the human element where malware analysis is very much needed to say, let's have skilled professionals that do this for a living dive into the malware and really analyze it so that we can better protect our organization.
Right. Now, would you say that this is more of a something we need to fix as an industry? Because I mean, you can go onto many cybersecurity definition websites,
Yeah.
and they'll mention static analysis, for example. But that model doesn't fit well if we want to differentiate digging into a file and analyzing it like you would in a sandbox or other, breakdown analysis techniques. The signature based style of flagging malware is fundamentally different from actually seeing its individual pieces and how it's working and learning from that file. So is this something that we should consider shifting just as an industry as a whole to, hey, these static pre-existing processes that have signatures from antivirus companies that are being updated after the fact, after the malware has already been released into the wild, and then eventually detected by these antivirus companies, and then eventually updated into their databases. Should we start considering that more of part of the detection branch versus the analysis branch?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. From, this makes me think of organizations that I've spoke to within the incident response side of my career and the managed detection is that a lot of organizations will try to put layers if, just like you said, if they solely look at static analysis and signature based being more of a detection style. I think that it really depends on how we're looking at it. In my opinion, I do think that that is very limited to your visibility with malware and having access to multiple streams of IOCs, of indicators of compromise, having the full proof. I mean, I'm sure we even discussed this in OPSWAT Academy, just creating more from a security side because there is so much to see, the importance of indicators of compromise and pulling that together. I think that detection should be a part of the static analysis. And even if it isn't, organizations can layer it, right? I think, having a really strong visibility, maybe, a SOC, a security operations center of skilled professionals, but also maybe malware analyst itself, or maybe a tool,
Mhm.
some type of software like what we have here at OPSWAT, not to be biased, but I think that, that's also why I joined OPSWAT. I think, our file scan, just like, you said, Nate, it's a very new department here, and it's been an amazing journey to even learn about everything that we do. But on top of the mission and the message of file scan is specifically what you summed up. I think that, our goal in this case is to really align with dynamic analysis and static. We not only want to look at the bare minimum of malware and detecting it. I think it's important, just like, how it's written too, how software file scan is written, and how it's scanning things, and the IOCs, and the message is that we want to give the best solution for the results for our analysts, for our
Mhm.
hunters, for people just like what I used to do, because it's just going to benefit organizations in the end.
Right. Man, so many good points that I want to unpack and talk about there, but I think we got to take a step back and actually talk a little bit more about what actually is threat hunting and IOCs to give because there's other points I want to further the conversation on, but I think for our audience and for everybody here, let's take a step back and actually explain what you mean by
Yeah.
these indicators of compromise and what a threat hunter actually does.
Yeah, good point. Let me take a step back. Um, so yeah, coming from the threat hunting side, the experience of that. So threat hunting in general can be, or a threat hunter or threat analyst, whatever the verbiage is, it's essentially all the same, right? You're looking at a threat into an environment. Is there suspicious software in the environment? Is there any scripting abuse? Is there lateral movement? All these different attack vectors. A good resource to really understand, I think, the threat hunting mentality is probably the MITRE attack framework. So I always kind of break this down. The MITRE attack framework is essentially a taxonomy of tactics and techniques globally, used across the cybersecurity community. And this is really done by researchers as well, within the industry and organizations and partnerships. So when we're looking at what a threat hunter does, and if you do break that down, that's where I'm getting a lot of the tactics from. So persistence, lateral movement, these are the type of things that are in the MITRE attack framework. To go back to that point,
Is the framework ever getting updated because of
yes,
evolutions in
yeah,
malware? Okay, okay.
yeah. Yeah, so the framework is consistently being updated with new tactics and techniques. And it's, even in a good interviewing tip, when somebody asks, where do you get your knowledge from? How do you keep up to date? I think MITRE Tech is a very great answer to say that too. Just side note for those that are looking for that. But when we're also looking at what a threat hunter does, is we want to say, how did that happen? right?
Hmm.
How is there suspicious software? What does that look like? What does that entail? Based on different industries and organizations, on what tools that you utilize as a threat hunter is going to vary.
Hmm.
And I say this because, just like Nate, in the industry, every organization buys different softwares, different tools, and
Different use cases. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And in my opinion, I think it's really hard to pinpoint, when you get asked, for example, maybe somebody is working at a supply chain company. What are you going to be looking at? I think a lot of technology might be outdated. So it's to where are they spending the money on the security operations center? What kind of tools? So just to level set and go back to that, a threat hunter is, or a threat analyst, whatever you want to call it, they are looking at a threat in an environment, and their main objective is to figure out, when did it happen? How did it happen? What is the overall orient of that process? Every organization of a threat hunter, and this is from my experience, and also um, just speaking with people in the industry and community, is that every SOC, maybe a security operations center or threat team, if you want to call it that, they
Hmm.
all have a different process of how they do things, right? So a lot of the industry talks about an OODA loop, which is such a funny word.
Okay.
Um,
I have never heard that. Okay.
yeah. So if I remember, it's observe, orient, decide, and act. So that is really an alignment for how some of the cybersecurity organizations do that. Specifically, if you work for a cybersecurity organization. So one of the key elements when being in threat hunting or threat analyzing is, do you know how to organize your findings, because and collaborate, right? I think it goes back to working on a team, just the typical work lifestyle, but when you're working with, for example, suspicious software, first we need to observe what it's doing, right? So when we're observing it, we're looking at, has it happened? How's it being broken down? What is it doing? What type of movement? Have we worked with this? Who's working with it? Is it
Hmm.
his team? Is it Steph's team? Is who's working on this? And then the orient process is creating almost an analysis of a timeline, of a follow-up, of writing it out, of how it happened. And then from there, when you're orienting it, you're going to decide, how did this happen? What's going to happen next? And then that act is the final conclusion of, is this a true false positive? So I think, when we're thinking about what a threat hunter does, it's going to be a lot more than breaking down a threat and finding out what's going on. It's going to be collaborating with the team, keeping up to date with a lot of threats as well, and those threat hunters just putting in now the IOC part, if that's okay.
Actually, before we go, I mean, this might tie in actually well. I have a question from the audience here that is relating to this. So they ask, are there any free tools that I can use to learn more about analyzing the threats of a file? I'd like to learn more about threat hunting and how what kind of tools are used in detecting that.
Yeah. So good answer, or not good. Good question.
Yeah.
Not going to be biased here, but I mean, it's a good question, so I have a good answer. BioScan actually has a free platform for the community to really analyze your more than files, right? You're going to look at any indicators of compromise. So when I speak about IOCs or indicator of compromise, it's going to be files, hashes, maybe SHA-256, open source intelligence, URLs, links, domains. Those all tie into an IOC. So going to that question is really saying, specifically file analyzing, I think is what they asked. is really going to be dependent on looking at different sources out there, and one of them is FileScan. I'm not gonna lie. I actually used FileScan before I joined OPSWAT, hence how I learned about it, the role, etc. But I think it all comes full circle because we have an amazing founder of FileScan who's created multiple kind of these next gen sandbox technology that looks at the adaptive threat analysis. But let me go back to that. I'm going too far ahead. So, kind of going back to that, when we're looking at a free resource, FileScan is one of them. You can sign up with a free account. There's a lot of API integrations. We look at a lot of HTML, PDFs, MISP sticks as well. So different variations of file, of hashes, of different processes. Something unique about file scan to different tools is that we have the capabilities of showing you the ILCs. And then if you want to do further things like looking at the threat intelligence of that, you can sign up for a different subscription that is now underlying with OPSWAT. Another resource out there is for files specifically, maybe to get a lot of lab work done, is creating your own sandbox environment. And I think that this is very fun. I have done this in the past and I still like to do it to compare different products, different tools. But when you're creating your own sandbox, of how to start, there's a lot of documentation out there. I think actually one of them is maybe threat hunting or threat intel GitHub. We can share some of those resources, but I think an awesome security on GitHub is my favorite. The author of that would be Billy. There's a lot of resources out there to say, here's a library of tools. So creating your own toolbox is something huge to me. So even if FileScan doesn't work, or if you hear of any other resources for different, analyzing other IOCs that you want to add that to your toolbox, start creating that list.
Yeah. And even just on a baseline to add to that, if you upload a file to FileScan or another free sandbox tool, for example, it's going to list out the findings of a file. Whether if it's accessing some external URL, making registry edits, whatever those aspects are, you can use those detections and those findings to then learn about those components, about file architecture or how the operating system processes those files. And by being shown that, hey, this registry edit, it's a malicious action, you can learn about that as just as its own IOC, and then compile all of your knowledge together that you gain from all these other detection mechanisms to further your understanding about what these compromising elements of files are. So
Yeah,
even
exactly.
you can use it as a starting point for your research.
Hmm. It all ties back, Nate, to almost like the OODA loop. The process.
Yes, the OODA
Yeah,
loop defenders.
yeah. Just like you said, you need all those IOCs. You need to kind of unpack what has happened, going down a timeline of events. And you brought up a really good point. When we're looking at the threat, how did it happen? But also circling back to what findings can we make out of this now? I think the difference is, when we're detecting or analyzing, is we're not just looking at the results and blocking it. We want to figure out more, just like you said, a whole list of IOCs and results.
Got it. And so to set the stage about this new file scan, this new malware analysis solution that OPSWAT's currently working on at the moment. It's this very new and exciting
Mhm.
technology. I wanted to outline a little bit about how our malware detection systems worked in the past, well, today, and where we've had our success. The primary thing that most customers know us for is for our multi-scan technology. This is a Metadefender Core platform that's the primary processing unit for all of our other solutions, whether it's Kiosk, Vault, etc. We even have Metadefender Cloud, which does the same thing, but it's on the cloud-based network. And the way uh, the files have such a high detection rate on these systems is that it's being scanned against multiple antivirus engines at one time, asynchronously. And what this essentially allows is if one of those antivirus companies, happens to update their signatures before all the other ones, you're still going to get that file caught. You're not going to um, miss an outbreak just because your antivirus company that you have throughout your organization happens to be 6 hours late, for example, updating that particular database. So it still has the limitations of static analysis. You still have to wait for the file to actually be included into those signatures in order to detect in the first place. But it does it makes the effectiveness of that type of scan, that static reading of a file, much more effective when you're comparing to a bunch of different, essentially competitors. If you think about it, they all want to be the first AV engine to catch that particular type of file. So
Mhm.
it's a healthy environment, I suppose. But we get to utilize all of it with the Metadefender Core platform. So that's you can think of that as the static aspect of that. And another solution that we've had for a long time here at OPSWAT, and something we're really proud of, is the deep CDR technology. And this works fundamentally differently. There's no pre-existing database of files and detections. This actually takes a file. Let's say it's a Word document, right? DocX files today they're archives. They're multiple objects inside of a single file. But this is even true for single flat files. They can be deconstructed and broken up into their individual components, whether they're embedded objects or if it's a macro, any other kind of component within the file. Things that you probably are familiar with as indicators of compromise, right? But the deep CDR technology would look at that and say, okay, if this is a potential threat vector, then we're just going to make it inert or remove it from the file. Uh, and on the other side of that, it's rebuilt. So it's CDR, content disarm and reconstruction. The reconstruction is the really important part. There's been solutions around for a long time that do a great job about deconstructing files, but they don't give you anything workable at the end. So the R part is the selling point here for the OPSWAT Deep CDR solution. It reconstructs the file to a usable state. So you'll get that document file back and it'll be completely usable, but with any of those potential threat vectors removed. Now, one of the challenges with that is you are technically ending up with a different file. So there's use cases for all these different kinds of approaches, and another aspect to this that we've had for kind of limited uploads, I would suppose, is a way we would best describe this, is to use a sandbox for maybe deeper analysis of files that may have been detected as a threat or files that you're unsure about. Um, and this was a traditional sandbox process where a file is uploaded into a virtual system that's taking a minute or 2 minutes to execute a file, um, and do the analysis and report on the confidence score on how clean that file actually is based on the actions that file is doing. You know, benefits and downsides to both. Static analysis is fast, very light on resources. Dynamic analysis or sandboxing is very resource intensive because you got to spin up an entire computer essentially to do this. So with all that stage set and all that information, what's different about this new approach that we're adopting with this file scan technology?
Yeah. So file scan alone is essentially what you said in a more advanced way. So setting up a sandbox, but you can think of it as that's file scan itself. If we're going to speak about the integration now with MD Core, just like Nate said, and having OPSWAT's biggest, I think, product here of Meta Defender Core, and then you also mentioned MD Cloud as well. I think, it's really good that you painted the picture for that. And then just to let the audience know, when we speak about file scan now, both both products that you spoke about, Nate, file scan is already a part of, right? So when we're speaking about when CDR does give you a new file, or it's essentially new because the archives have been kind of cleaned up, we're looking at, is it malicious? What's file scan doing in the back end of that is now breaking down more IOCs, in a much quicker way as far as how you would detonate in a virtual machine.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to kind of allude to because from what I've seen, it's way more efficient than just a standard sandbox. So what makes it um, so much faster and more viable as
Mhm.
an inline solution than something like a sandbox would, where I can only process, you know, I'm either processing 4 files a minute or I have 500 sandbox virtual machines running at the same time and spending thousands of dollars on my energy bill. What's the approach here that makes it stand out? You did mention like kernel behaviors and other items.
Yeah, yeah, I think itself is that our engine that we have is very technical. We can dive into that, when we have a really talented, amazing team of engineers. They're building this um, with a lot of logistics in our end. We are utilizing a lot of resources out there that are very kind of in line with what FileScan looks like as a standalone and also integrated. The fact that we have an integration with REST APIs, having you install it within minutes is just a lot quicker. The architecture of FileScan itself is really solely based on a lot of our own kind of proprietary code as well as things out there of how we look at things. We have different agent features, and the main thing that we really look at is things like YAR rules. Kind of to circle back, the main thing with FileScan and how we're looking at the different kind of unpacking these things like and maybe having an emulator, looking at that process of the files and not only looking at the static analysis, but now pulling in dynamic analysis when we're decompiling things. We have a huge list of supported files, right? We have a lot of integrations with new things with SOARs, now looking at SIMs. So I think that when we're building this and installing things, and that's I think it's the most important thing is that you know, when you're looking at how we're doing it, it's not gonna be very, very much like your typical sandbox. And why it's next gen is, we have the what we call it our analyzer engines, that's gonna be based off APIs, having a very unique setup, and we share a lot of this on our docs on docs at OPSWAT for FileScan. We show, what bucket are we using, or we're utilizing the cloud. So I think it's just seconds of spinning up. But yeah, and then now that we're integrated with MD Cloud, MD Core, and just a side note, I believe Nate, MD Cloud is free to use. There's a free platform, right?
It does offer free analysis as well, and we talked about free tools for
Yeah,
analyzing files. I actually don't know for certain if the file scan has taken place of our previous backend sandbox
yeah,
yet or not. It
Yeah,
has. Okay.
yeah. So when
So
you go on MD Cloud now and you're searching or analyzing a file, there's now a checkbox that says adaptive threat analysis. I know sometimes the wording is all over the place, but that's just to show you guys that that's actually FileScan's engine, running in the back end of that. So just like you said, it's another free use case.
yeah, and you know, answering that question as to what makes the file scan IO different from a standard sandbox, it just sounds like there's so many things. based on how it's hard to articulate
Yeah.
quickly in a couple sentences. But a lot of the features, and we'll be sending out a follow up to this webinar as well, with maybe some of this documentation attached, so people can learn a little bit more about what these next gen sandboxes really are accomplishing. That's so much more efficient than what we've seen in the past. Um, it's really exciting stuff. And yeah, and going back to one of the first questions that I asked you, and you answered, you talked about layering. You talked about you were just talking with either a client, I believe it was,
Mhm.
and looking at their particular environment, and they were thinking about a layered approach. And this is something that you know you see everywhere. You see, not even just in cybersecurity. It comes up a lot in this term, but even high availability for your infrastructure, or even non-technical problems that people face. This term is the Swiss cheese approach, where you have layers of Swiss cheese, and on each layer there is a hole, but
Mhm.
eventually you're going to hit a wall if you
Yeah.
have enough layers of Swiss cheese. So, that's kind of the entire concept here of really OPSWAT as a company. When we're providing our security solutions, it's not just one thing, and I think that's difficult to um, initially understand, because usually companies offer an all-encompassing solution, which technically it is. But the fact of the matter is, it's really doing a lot of unique things, a lot of really unique things. And this Swiss cheese model, it's going to go through static, it's going to go through dynamic, it's going to go through, excuse me, all these different analysis steps, be deconstructed, reconstructed, and all that's obviously very different depending on the use case, completely configurable on those endpoints. And it's really exciting to see this evolve in real
Yeah.
time as we're watching this technology be built. Um, but as a cybersecurity professional, people on this call that are actually looking to learn more about this, it is important to understand how these pieces work individually. And we try to isolate those concepts in the academy courses as well. But just to frame this conversation, at any point when we're talking about the file scan, uh, it's really talking about this deeper analysis, a kind of approach to malware, rather than uh, statically scanning it. And I actually have a question here that's really relevant to my last statement here. This is I'll let you answer this one, Stephanie. Is malware analysis the same as heuristic analysis?
Yeah, I think, I don't know the definition of heuristic analysis.
Oh no, okay, I can answer this one then. This
Okay,
is
yeah.
this is a fun one.
You go ahead. You got it.
Okay, no problem. So heuristic analysis is, it's kind of you can almost think of it as a halfway point between um, a regular standard flat signature detection versus a more deeper analysis detection.
Okay.
Uh,
Gotcha.
Typically, when we talk about it of a file, you've got to make a fairly exact match to be confident enough that that file is that particular brand of malware. Heuristic will instead look at the compiled code elements of that file and match those individual elements on a more fundamental or basic level. So you're more looking at for patterns of malware, and then you can have heuristic aggressiveness, where you're essentially looking at smaller and smaller bits of traditional compiled code on these malware samples. And the problem with that is, the smaller you look, the more you're going to match real legitimate files, because they might use some kind of code base, some library that's not inherently malicious, but happens to be used in a lot of malicious
Gotcha.
components.
So the
So
scope is very narrow. Yeah.
yeah, it can be, but you can also be more lenient with it as well. So usually heuristics have settings that you can choose. If you have antivirus on your laptop, and that you actually see the word heuristic anywhere, which it's kind of not so common
Yeah,
anymore, I would say, because a lot of people don't really, it doesn't click as well as a lot of the other common terms. But if you do see that option on your local antivirus, basically that when you're setting that potency, aggressiveness of that heuristic engine, you're basically choosing how small of a pinpoint are you looking before that antivirus decides to flag that file as suspicious or infected. Okay,
yeah. I think that can be probably the same as other terminology used in the space. I think the importance of it, Nate, and going back to, what you said is why all this is important is because when there is custom code, you know, the point of OPSWAT using multiple, multi-scanning and now file scan and all these great things going on, I think that, we have to think about when you have that one AV or software that's specifically looking at what it's always used to looking at and not broadening its scope by looking at the custom code. That's where that human element piece comes in. So, you know, the heuristic approach is probably a huge difference now that I've heard it and now I'm thinking about it within the malware analysis.
got it. All right, I'm going to shift gears here, and we only have 15 minutes left. And I was hoping to have a little more time to talk about this topic since
We'll
it's
need a
all
part
over.
two.
Yeah, it's all over the place everywhere. But I kind of wanted to jump into some conversation with AI and related to cybersecurity because there's AIs everywhere right now, more so than ever, I guess I would suppose.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to start with this is that this uh, hype around artificial intelligence, especially around large language models, which, if you boil it down and you're looking at what we just talked about with heuristic analysis, you could boil that down to essentially text that's getting analyzed, right? So you could that's applicable to potential analysis techniques. But I want to take a step back, and this isn't the first time that there's been a huge buzz around AI and cybersecurity. In fact, I think it was just a couple years ago where there was this uh, pretty common opinion that cybersecurity as a whole is pretty much solved because of emerging AI technologies
Right.
to always know that this is malware. In fact, I was actually just speaking to a developer um, at a uh, offsite location from another company, not involved in cybersecurity. So all the audience knows that this isn't one of our developers, but he had the opinion that that cybersecurity was essentially solved at this point, which is it's both a great thing to hear from us in the industry that we're doing a good enough job that people have that opinion, but it's also very not true. Um, so why did that fall off? Why did that fail a couple years ago in the first place? Because it died off, and we just didn't really hear about cybersecurity AI anymore.
Yeah, because I think because of all the attacks that have occurred solely based off AI, right? I think a lot of the software that organizations have rely on AI. And the piece that's missing, kind of going back, is, attack vectors are getting more advanced. Just to answer this in the time that we have, um, attack vectors are getting more advanced. AI is not solely gonna be as progressive as to how fast the cybersecurity vectors are changing, new threats, new vulnerabilities, right? So when we're looking at AI, it's a robotic process of looking at things that they're used to looking at. It's a routine. I'm not doubting or downing, AI. It's not solely bad. I think a great security model is having a little bit of AI, machine learning, and then the human element. I think those three pieces for any security posture of an environment are going to tie in the things of everything going on, right? If we look at a lot of the major attacks, maybe Kaseya, Hafnium, a lot of this has happened from the typical process of what they looked at, and regarding AI and what that looks like and why it died off is the artificial intelligence piece is not as essential or crucial as to now an actual human being looking at that file, analyzing it, and threat hunting. And which is why we need the people in the academy. It kind of breaks down to just like you said, the Swiss cheese approach, and I think that can be used in multiple different ways. But yeah, going back to that, I think it's a whole nother topic, and I think looking at the bigger picture, it's not solving a lot. It's not protecting anybody if you solely have it based on that. So I think that's where the hype really died down is looking at, look at the headlines and news out there of everything.
Right. Yeah. It didn't work as effectively as everyone was hoping it would, and yeah, that's why. Um, going on this actually got me thinking about kind of a, I guess, a philosophical question, because as you were answering this, I started imagining an AI bot trying to hack a system with another AI bot protecting it, red team, blue team. Actually, there are been several AI red team, blue team hackathons that have been hosted already.
Yeah.
But going back to a more fundamental level with this, and this might not be true. What's true for us as humans might not necessarily be true for AI models, but just from the ease of creation, would you say that it's easier to create a new threat vector than it is to create software that identifies it, or vice versa? Which would be technically a faster thing for a developer of equal skill, I suppose, to accomplish one versus the other.
That's a good question. I think that it's easier to create a new threat vector, and that's why we see the threats arising today. All the new IOCs, but also it's the community kind of sharing everything now, which is a good thing, as to what's going on in their industry. I think it's a quicker approach to say, okay, this has happened before. Let's just fix a little code, spin it back out, attack them again. And
Mhm.
I think organizations are not used to that change and new approach of vectors just being a lot quicker, because cybersecurity is everlasting, ever changing, constantly
Right.
changing. Um, I don't think people are keeping up.
And that's the kind of where I was alluding to, actually, because if we're using AI to defend against attacks, and like you just mentioned, you know, AI is being used to create attacks, and if it's easier for the AI to change something in the code that makes it not detectable, and that process is slower, then it's a losing battle.
Yep.
It's a losing battle no matter how much AI you throw at it. If your other opponents always have a leg up, and so that's why we still have these long-standing models, Swiss cheese approach, multiple areas of protection, things that are process oriented, not just technically oriented. That's so pivotal to you know putting the companies that we as cybersecurity professionals, or you as a company owner, whoever is tasked to protect something, uh, that it's we don't rely on just one solution.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
it's always multiple.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. So let's see if we have any other questions from the audience. Um, I thought OPSWAT used multiple antivirus engines to detect malware. Did this change? Yeah, we mentioned that before. So the OPSWAT Metadefender Core solution. Oh, I might have not said that question loud enough. It's I thought OPSWAT used multiple antivirus vendors to detect malware. Did this change?
Mm, mhm.
And this may have been asked before we talked about this, but yes, OPSWAT still uses multiple AV engines to do the static detection of a file, and the additional analysis elements of something like file scan and sandboxing is just part of an additional layer to that. So we're doing both. We're doing
More
both.
layers, more security.
More layers, more
Yeah.
security. Okay. Um, I think that is coming up here on the hour. Do you have any closing thoughts here, Stephanie? Actually, I think we can take this time to let's talk a little bit more about this feature, about this offering from OPSWAT. We'll give you a 5 minutes here to kind of spotlight the new solution. Just for more of a product pitch, I like to give my guests who are
Mhm.
particularly invested in a particular topic here at OPSWAT the last few minutes of the webinar to just talk about their solution, to give us a pitch and why it's great.
Yeah, I think, it really speaks for itself, and I think that if you just go to FileScan, .io. It is a free platform. Feel free to use it. Sign up. We have a bunch of malware samples that we can give out. Communicate with us, reach out to us. Even if you're not in the industry, we're still here for advice. You can message me anywhere. I think the use case of that is FileScan has built this great community platform to where now it's integrated with OPSWAT. It's very easy to install. The approach is really nice. The integrations that we're spinning up are so attractive. Just like with OPSWAT using multiple AVs and doing the multi-scanning, we wanna reach that kind of complexity and add the layer of security there. We not only just want to be the file, the looking at just files, the fact that we have a lot of great news coming out is really exciting. Our main audience is, I guess, here's the little pitch is, what file scan would be kind of used for, and the best use cases would be any industry that is really looking at further dissecting and analyzing their IOCs, specifically their files. So, if you're looking at a URL, we're going to show you the results of the files that are hiding in that URL that are shown with that URL, the threat vectors along there too. So, we really specialize in a lot of environments such as government security related, as an isolated kind of network type of infrastructure, so an air gapped environment. We have instances where we can spin up a cloud instance for our own customers that are interested in that, and then as well as an on-prem, and something very attractive to FileScan is that you don't need internet access to create to install it, right? So go through our documentation, go through the docs at FileScan, give us any recommendations that you have, any feedback, utilize the free community platform. There's a lot of resources out there, just like I said, and we'll share some too, so that there can be free hands-on experiences. And I think that that's kind of the highlight of FileScan itself. And it's really important that, we understand first what everything kind of means in it. I know looking at it sometimes can be very technical, very difficult to understand. So there's a lot of key infrastructures in that, and that's understanding the terminology. What's a hash? What's a YAR string? What's extracted? What's downloaded? And there's just a lot of exciting news coming out with it because it is so young and new to the organization, like you said, Nate. I think it kind of pinpoints us to, it's exciting. I mean, it's like a startup. We're creating new features. We're doing a lot of training. This is just publicity for more of FileScan. So really glad to be here. Really excited to share more on FileScan, and I know Nate and I can talk forever about these topics, so I'll stop here.
Yeah, just unfortunately we have run out of time. And thank you everybody for joining this call, and thank you for your participation and chat here. There's several questions we didn't have time to get to, but we'll make sure to follow up
Yeah,
and look forward to the post webinar email. You'll also see emails for the next upcoming webinar as well. So look forward to that. We'll have a new guest on board.
cool.
Thank you, Stephanie, so much for your time. It was a great talk.